The galaxy had never known a force like the one that arrived on Earth in the year 2147. A fleet of imposing alien warships, their technology light-years ahead of humanity's, descended upon Earth without warning. The invaders, the Vroth, a militaristic empire that spanned countless star systems, arrived with one purpose: to annex Earth and its resources. What they didn't anticipate was humanity's incredible resilience. For years, Earth's leaders had worked behind the scenes, preparing for a conflict that was only a matter of time. Despite humanity's progress, they were not ready for the Vrotha's devastating assault. The Vrotha's ships were armored beyond belief, and their weapons obliterated entire cities in the blink of an eye. Earth's military forces stood little chance against the invaders. The invaders tore through Earth's defenses like a knife through paper. The world fell into chaos. The cities that once stood as symbols of human achievement were reduced to rubble. The population was forced into submission, scattered in pockets around the globe, as the Vroth enslaved and controlled what remained. Humanity's military might have been shattered, its greatest minds taken captive, and its governments destroyed. The Vroth believed the war was won, and Earth's struggle had ended. But the Vroth had underestimated Earth's greatest strength, its people. In the dark, abandoned underground bunkers of the old world, a resistance began to form. Small, covert cells of survivors, hardened by the brutal realities of war, began to build something more than just defiance. They had learned the art of guerrilla warfare, taking down Vroth patrols with precision strikes. Their weapons, salvaged from the remnants of Earth's fallen military, were crude but effective against the Vrotha's overwhelming superiority. While the Vroth focused on their stranglehold over Earth's shattered civilization, the Resistance had a different plan in mind. They would rebuild their forces in secret, gather resources, and bide their time. The world's true weapon had never been the advanced technology or the grand armies of old, it was humanity itself. The adaptability, the innovation, the sheer will to survive against impossible odds. This was what the Vroth had failed to understand. In the heart of the Resistance, a leader emerged. Captain Kala Voss was a former military strategist, a brilliant mind who had been captured by the Vroth during the initial invasion. In their detention centers, she had seen firsthand how the invaders operated, their weaknesses, their reliance on their superior technology. And she had escaped, using a mix of quick thinking, cunning, and sheer luck. Her experience made her invaluable, and soon she became the beacon for Earth's most loyal and determined soldiers. As she sat in the command center of the Resistance, a hidden underground complex deep in the mountains, Kala looked over the map of the occupied Earth. Her gaze swept over the cities now under Vroth control, her mind already planning the first steps of humanity's counterattack. They had lost the war once, but they were far from defeated. "Listen up," she said, her voice calm but filled with resolve. The room grew quiet, the gathered soldiers, engineers, and scientists looking to her for leadership. This isn't about revenge, not yet. This is about survival. We start with sabotage, small strikes that will make them second-guess their control. We destroy their supply lines, take out their command posts, and we send a message. One of the engineers, a young man named Jace, stepped forward. "Captain, we've been able to reverse engineer some of their technology. I think we can build weapons that will give us an edge, if we can get the materials." "We'll get them," Kala said firmly. "And when the time comes, we'll take the fight to them. But we need to move in silence for now. Gather your teams, we work at night, and we disappear into the shadows by morning." Her words ignited a spark of hope in the room. They had no illusions about the danger that lay ahead. The Vroth were ruthless, their tactics unforgiving, and their empire vast. But something had changed. Earth would not kneel forever. For the first time since the invasion, the Resistance was united by a single, burning purpose: to reclaim their world. And they would start by sending a message. A message that Earth was not done yet. The Vroth had underestimated humanity, and they would soon learn the consequences of making such a mistake. The rebellion had only just begun. The next few months were a blur of planning, small victories, and hard-won secrets. Kala Voss worked tirelessly, overseeing every operation, coordinating sabotage efforts, and strengthening the network of resistance cells. While the Vroth maintained their iron grip on Earth's surface, the underground world began to stir with purpose and power. Humanity was no longer merely surviving, they were learning to fight back. In the heart of Europe, a small town named Lyon had become a key center for the resistance. Hidden beneath its broken streets, a secret facility housed some of the brightest minds left on Earth. It was here that Jace, the young engineer who had once been a mere survivor, became something more. With the guidance of captured human scientists who had once worked for the Vroth, Jace began to reverse-engineer the alien technology the invaders had used against them. "Captain, you need to see this," Jace said one evening, his voice a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Kala strode into the facility, her boots echoing off the metal floors. The room was lined with makeshift workstations, each one piled high with scraps of Vroth technology, as well as Earth-made components. Jace was hunched over a workbench, his face lit by the soft glow of monitors and the flicker of a welding torch. On the table in front of him was a strange device, a compact, sleek, and unmistakably alien weapon, its surface pulsing with faint energy. "What is it?" Kala asked, her tone careful but intrigued. "It's a disruptor rifle," Jace said, straightening up and pushing his glasses up his nose. "It's designed to incapacitate or kill by destabilizing molecular bonds within a target. A single shot can render an entire building to rubble." "But..." He paused, looking up at Kala with a grin that only grew wider. "We think we can adapt it to our own weapons. With enough modification, it'll fire a blast that is both destructive and covert. It can be used against their troops, even their ships, without them ever knowing what hit them." Kala studied the weapon, her fingers brushing against the cold, metallic surface. The idea of humanity wielding something as powerful as this, something that could bring the Vroth to their knees, filled her with a sense of hope and resolve. This could be the breakthrough they needed. "Good work, Jace. If this works as well as you think, the resistance will have a chance to do more than just harass them. We'll be able to take the fight to them on a scale they won't expect." "Exactly," Jace said, his excitement barely contained. "And we're working on something even bigger. A way to hack their communications network. We might be able to turn their own technology against them." The thought was electrifying. The Vroth had relied heavily on their superior technology to maintain control, to track movements, and to enforce their rule. If the resistance could infiltrate that network and disable it from the inside, it would create chaos among the Vroth ranks, disorienting them, causing confusion and disorder, all while humanity moved in for the kill. The next phase of the Resistance's plan was set. But there was a problem. The Vroth had been tightening their hold over the planet's most critical resources. The cities were under constant surveillance, and every military-grade facility had been turned into a fortress. Earth's major ports and mines were now locked down, and most of the world's remaining resources were controlled by the invaders. If they were to mount a full-scale counterattack, they would need access to critical supplies. They would need to break into the Vrotha's strongholds, a mission that seemed almost impossible. Yet, the Resistance had a secret weapon. A defector. Lieutenant Aaron Kala was once a high-ranking officer in the Vroth military, one of the few who had seen the worst of their empire's cruelty and had grown disillusioned with their conquest. After witnessing the destruction of Earth and the subjugation of its people, Aaron had turned on her own kind, fleeing to Earth with crucial intelligence on the Vrotha's security systems and supply lines. She was now an invaluable asset, her knowledge of the Vrotha's operations providing the Resistance with the intelligence they needed to plan more effective strikes. "Kala," Aaron said one night, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "I've been inside their supply base on the western continent. It's heavily guarded, but there's a vulnerability, a blind spot in their security, an unguarded passage that leads directly to their munitions stores. If we hit them there, we can cripple their logistics for months. But we'll need a distraction, something big, something to pull their attention away from the target." Kala knew the risks of such an operation. A strike of this magnitude would require precise coordination and perfect timing. But there was no alternative. The Resistance had to act now or risk losing everything they had fought for. We do it, she said firmly. We hit them fast, hit them hard, and disappear before they can retaliate. This is the beginning of the end for the Vroth. Get your teams ready. We're going to make sure they never see us coming. As the plans for the operation took shape, a renewed sense of purpose and unity swept through the resistance. The small, secret cells that had once only hoped for survival were now a true army, armed with alien technology, human ingenuity, and the will to reclaim their world. And so, with the first mission in place, the seeds of resistance began to sprout across the globe. The Vroth, unaware of the storm that was brewing, continued their reign, confident in their dominance. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity. And soon, they would discover just how costly that mistake had been. The night was cold, and the full moon hung above the craggy mountains like a silent sentinel. Below, in the shadows, the resistance moved like ghosts, swift, silent, and resolute. Kala Voss stood at the center of a small command hub, watching as the operation unfolded on multiple holoscreens. The mission was simple but dangerous: infiltrate the Vroth supply base in the western continent, disrupt their munitions, and escape before their response forces could retaliate. It was a gamble, but it was one they had to take. The timing had to be perfect. Status report, Kala demanded, her voice steady despite the tension that hummed through the command center. Jace, the young engineer turned weapons expert, was seated at a console, his hands dancing over the controls. We've got the disruptor rifles powered and ready. Our teams are in position, and the blind spot in their defenses is clear. They won't see us coming, Captain. Aaron Kala, the former Vroth officer who had defected to Earth's side, was standing by, her eyes scanning the data feed. She had given them the intelligence that had made this mission possible. She knew the enemy's weaknesses and their patterns of behavior. It was her insight that had turned the tide in their favor. She now spoke, her voice cold and calculating. The Vroth have their forces spread out in small contingents around the base, but their command center is centralized. We'll need to take that down first to disorient them. Once their leadership is in chaos, we can destroy their munitions. Kala nodded. And the distraction? A flicker of a smile crossed Aaron's face. That's my part. I'll draw them out. Leave the rest to me. It was a risk, but Kala trusted her. The defector had proven her loyalty time and again, and her knowledge of the Vrotha's tactics was unparalleled. The plan was set, and the operation began. The resistance teams infiltrated the perimeter of the Vroth base under the cover of darkness. They were experts in moving quietly, slipping past guard patrols and security sensors, their movements synchronized with precision. The first phase of the plan was a silent breach into the base, utilizing the weak points Aaron had identified. No alarms had been triggered yet, and the Vroth, confident in their superiority, had no reason to believe they were under threat. Meanwhile, Aaron made her move. Using an old, hacked Vroth communicator, she sent out a signal that mimicked a distress call from one of the Vrotha's high-ranking commanders. It was a bait, a lure that would draw their attention away from the Resistance's true target. As predicted, the Vroth responded immediately, redirecting several of their most elite squads toward the supposed emergency. The base's command center was now poorly defended, leaving a perfect opening. Phase 2, execute, Kala's voice came through the comms, and the soldiers on the ground began their assault. In a split second, the first disruptor rifle was fired, a brilliant, blue-white flash of energy lighting up the dark, followed by the explosive sound of a nearby Vroth communications tower disintegrating. The weapon had been modified, as Jace had promised, to create a pinpoint, devastating force. The Vroth guards in the area collapsed in an instant, their armor flickering and shorting out as the molecular destabilizer pulsed through them. It was chaos. The resistance moved in like a wave, systematically taking out Vroth soldiers and planting explosive charges on key supply depots. They were on a tight schedule, they needed to complete the sabotage and get out before the Vroth could regroup. As planned, the explosions rang out, and the base's internal systems began to overload, creating a disorienting atmosphere of confusion. Command center is down, Aaron reported through the comms, her voice tinged with satisfaction. "They're scrambling. You've got 5 minutes before they send reinforcements." "Copy that," Kala responded, her mind already calculating the next move. Teams A and B, finish the munitions, then fall back to extraction. We're on a tight timeline. But things were not going as smoothly as they had hoped. A sudden, sharp explosion echoed through the air. A stray blast from one of the Resistance's own explosives had hit the wrong target. A Vroth patrol had wandered too close. The sound of the blast rippled through the base, and immediately, the alarms blared. "Vroth reinforcements inbound," Jace's voice crackled over the comms. "We're running out of time." "We're not done yet," Kala said, her voice hardening with resolve. Phase 3, Retreat Strategy. Now. The Resistance fighters quickly gathered their weapons, pulling back toward the extraction points. But the Vroth were not easily fooled. Within minutes, their forces began to converge on the base, alerted to the breach. Vroth warships had already begun descending from orbit, and a massive assault was incoming. "Kala, I'm not leaving without you," Aaron's voice cut through the comms. She was still within the compound, having completed her mission to sow chaos among the Vroth ranks. She'd been an invaluable asset to the operation, but now the situation was becoming increasingly desperate. "I'm not leaving you either," Kala shot back, her words sharp but filled with the weight of command. "Meet us at the rendezvous point. We'll get out together." A fierce, final firefight broke out as the Resistance fought their way back to the extraction zone. Blasts from Vroth energy weapons filled the air, but the Resistance held their ground. Every soldier fought like their life depended on it, because it did. Finally, the escape plan was enacted. As the last of the Resistance fighters reached the rendezvous point, the ground shook beneath them. Vroth warships hovered overhead, unleashing heavy fire on the base. Kala's heart pounded, but her resolve never wavered. And then, a flash of bright light as a shuttle from the Resistance fleet arrived just in time, lifting them from the hellish battleground. As the shuttle ascended into the air, the Vroth base exploded behind them in a massive fireball, the result of their successful sabotage. "We've struck them a real blow," Kala said as she surveyed the destruction below. But this is just the beginning. The Resistance had won the first major battle. The Vroth had been forced to retreat, temporarily crippled, their supply lines shattered. The thunder had struck. And now, Earth's revenge was no longer just a dream, it was a promise. The glow of the flames from the destroyed Vroth base flickered in the distance as the shuttle ascended into the sky, carrying the weary but triumphant Resistance fighters to safety. Kala Voss sat silently in her seat, staring out at the stars, her thoughts racing. The mission had been a success, but the cost had been high. Several good men and women had fallen, and the Vroth were not likely to let this insult pass lightly. In the days following the raid, the Resistance regrouped. The damage they had inflicted on the Vrotha's munitions stockpile had been significant, and their communications were in disarray. But it was only a temporary setback for the Conquerors. The Vroth, as Kala knew, would retaliate, and they would do so with overwhelming force. The Resistance's victory had reverberated across the globe, sending a message to the Vroth: Earth was not broken. Humanity was not defeated. Yet, as the days passed, the inevitable counterattack came, swift, brutal, and precise. Vroth warships, massive and terrifying, began appearing in Earth's orbit in greater numbers. Their superior weapons and technology were unmatched, and soon the skies were filled with their menacing ships. They launched a series of devastating orbital bombardments, targeting the cities that had once been strongholds of humanity's resistance efforts. Entire regions were leveled as the Vroth made it clear that Earth's rebellion would be crushed. Within the first week of the counterattack, thousands of civilians were killed, and resistance cells were scattered to the wind. The Vroth did not just rely on their superior firepower, they employed psychological warfare as well. Every major city had its communications silenced, and any remaining resistance fighters were ruthlessly hunted down. The war had taken a darker turn. Humanity's hope, once sparked by the successful raid, now teetered on the edge of extinction. Kala paced through the war room, her thoughts dark and focused. Her heart ached for the fallen, but there was no time for grief. The Vroth were using their full might to crush everything the Resistance had built. In a cruel twist, Earth's own government structures had been decimated in the initial invasion, leaving no central authority to coordinate the defense. They had been fighting without a unified command, relying on small, fragmented cells of resistance. That was about to change. "We can't fight them head-on," Erin Kala said, her voice hoarse as she joined Kala in the war room. "We'll never win that way. We need to hit them where it hurts, their command structure. If we can cut the head off the snake, the body will fall." Kala turned to face her. "I agree. But we need a plan. A real one, not a Hail Mary." "We take out their leadership," Erin said, a cold fire in her eyes. "The Vroth have been too centralized, too reliant on their high command. If we cripple that, the Vroth will be thrown into chaos. We know where they are, their central command, deep within their flagship. If we can get in there, disrupt their command hierarchy, we could destabilize their entire operation." The central command ship, the Vrothkar, was the most fortified structure in Vroth space, orbiting a barren moon far from Earth. It was a formidable fortress, and reaching it would be nearly impossible. But the more Kala considered it, the more she realized that this might be the only chance to turn the tide. The Vroth had underestimated Earth once, and they might do so again. "We'll need a way to infiltrate their ship undetected," Kala said. "And we'll need to hit it fast, before they can react. The element of surprise is our only advantage." The team spent the following days working tirelessly to prepare for the operation. Jace continued to refine the disruptor weapons, and the Resistance's engineers worked on hacking Vroth communications to create a diversion. They also began assembling a team of elite operatives, the best soldiers, the most cunning tacticians, and the experts in alien technology. The operation was dubbed Shadow Strike. But as the Resistance prepared, the Vroth moved with terrifying speed. Their retaliation, swift and merciless, soon spread beyond Earth. The Vroth expanded their hunt, targeting any planet with a known human presence. In the wake of their orbital bombardments, they sent down ground troops, vast, terrifying legions of armored soldiers, led by elite commanders, all bent on eradicating humanity. The Resistance was being driven back. "Kala, we've got another problem," Jace's voice crackled over the comms one evening. "We've been tracking the Vrotha's movements, and there's something worse coming. They've begun deploying Harbinger ships, massive warships equipped with planet-cracking weapons. If they reach Earth, it'll be over." "How much time do we have?" Kala asked, feeling the weight of the situation settle like a cold stone in her gut. "Less than a week," Jace replied grimly. "They're heading toward us, and if we don't stop them, they'll level the planet. We don't have the firepower to go head-to-head with these ships. The only way we stand a chance is if we disable them from the inside, but we'll need to get to their command ship first." Kala's mind raced. The plan for Shadow Strike was already incredibly risky. But with the Harbinger ships on the way, the stakes had just escalated beyond anything they had imagined. The Vroth were playing for keeps now, and humanity was on the verge of extinction. "Prepare the fleet. We're going to hit them where it hurts. Everything depends on this. If we fail, it's over for all of us." As the final preparations were made for the assault on the Vrothkar, Kala's mind was clear. This was it. The last stand. The operation was humanity's best hope, but the odds were impossible. Yet, as she stared out into the stars, something deep inside her remained resolute. The Vroth might be unstoppable, but they had never faced Earth at its full strength. The human spirit, their ingenuity, and their relentless drive for survival, those were forces the Vroth could never comprehend. If they were going to reclaim the galaxy, it would start with this one strike. It was their only chance. The countdown to Shadow Strike had begun, and there was no turning back. Humanity's last hope rested on this mission, and the pressure was unimaginable. The Harbinger ships, massive and terrifying, were only days away from entering Earth's atmosphere, and the Vroth would stop at nothing to obliterate what remained of humanity. The time to act was now. Kala Voss stood on the bridge of the Resistance flagship Hope's Ember, overlooking the fleet that had been assembled for the strike. Hundreds of ships, from stealth fighters to commandeered Vroth vessels, were preparing for the most dangerous mission in human history. The Resistance had managed to gather a ragtag but resourceful fleet, humanity's best chance against the technological juggernaut the Vroth had become. Captain, Aaron Kala approached, her face somber yet determined. Our intel on the Vrothkar is solid. We know where its weak points are, and we've managed to get a few calm scramblers in place. But we're still not sure about their defense grid. Their fleet is moving in to intercept us, and we'll need to move fast if we're to get past it. We don't have a choice, Kala replied, her voice firm. We strike hard, strike fast. We disable the fleet's communications first. Once we do that, we'll get our team on board the Vrothkar. The Harbinger ships are the Vrotha's backup plan, but they won't be able to launch if we knock out their command center. We need to disable their fleet's coordination. It's the only way we can turn the tide. Jace's voice crackled through the comms, his tone filled with tension. The fighters are ready. We've got the disruptor weapons primed and the ship-to-ship comms hacked. We'll be able to confuse their fleets long enough to create a gap for the main team to board the command ship. But once we make our move, there's no turning back. We'll make it back, Kala said, a quiet promise that she wasn't sure she entirely believed. She knew the risks, but there was no time for doubt. Failure was not an option. Humanity was hanging by a thread. The fleet launched at dawn, cutting through the blackness of space, their course set for the heart of the Vrotha's domain. As they approached the orbit of the barren moon where the Vrothkar awaited, the Vroth fleet came into view. A vast armada of warships, each one larger and more menacing than anything Earth had ever seen, moved to intercept them. Thousands of Vroth soldiers stood ready aboard each ship, awaiting the moment to crush the human resistance. All units, prepare for engagement, Kala commanded as her ship rumbled with the vibrations of its engines. Remember the plan. We hit their communications grid, then send our infiltration team directly to the Vrothkar. We've got one shot at this. A chorus of affirmations filled the comms as the fleet began to split, small stealth fighters darting toward the Vroth ships while the main resistance vessels held back. The tension in the air was palpable. Every ship, every pilot, every soldier had a singular goal, to cripple the Vroth and take back the galaxy. 5 minutes to contact, Jace called from the command center. The Vroth are moving to intercept. Commencing ECM, now. Suddenly, the silence of space was shattered by the roar of battle. The Resistance fleet's stealth fighters activated their cloaking devices, slipping past the Vroth ships and getting into position. The larger ships opened fire, their weapons lighting up the black void, but the Resistance vessels were agile, weaving between enemy fire and avoiding direct hits. Then, as the first volley of fire came in, Jace activated the scramblers. Waves of interference rippled across the Vroth fleet's communication channels. The sudden loss of contact between ships caused confusion and chaos among the Vroth forces. For the first time in months, the invaders' ranks were thrown into disarray. We've got the gap. Aaron shouted over the comms. Go, go, go. At that moment, Kala knew that this was their chance. The Resistance fighters, now unchallenged, made their move. A handful of specialized boarding crafts, designed for stealth and speed, launched toward the massive flagship, the Vrothkar. Kala's breath hitched as she watched their progress. They were heading straight into the heart of the enemy's strongest vessel, a ship that had been built to be an impenetrable fortress. And yet, with the Vrotha's communications crippled and their fleet scrambling to regain control, the human team might just have a chance. On board the Vrothkar, the elite team of Resistance operatives, including Aaron and Jace, infiltrated the hull of the massive warship. Their objective was clear: disable the command center, prevent the launch of the Harbinger ships, and kill the Vroth leadership. Everything hinged on them executing this mission with flawless precision. They moved through the corridors like shadows, their footsteps barely making a sound. Every resistance fighter had been handpicked for their skills in combat, stealth, and sabotage. They were humanity's best, and they would need to be to survive the dangers that awaited them. As they breached the command center, the door slid open with a mechanical hiss. The Vroth command personnel inside froze at the sight of the intruders, but it was too late. The team descended on them with practiced efficiency, taking down the guards and soldiers in a flurry of quick strikes and suppressed gunfire. Kala's heart raced in her chest as she listened to the updates from the ground team. Jace was in charge of disabling the command ship systems, while Aaron worked with the others to secure the leadership. Every second counted. If they didn't succeed here, the Harbinger ships would be launched, and Earth would face utter destruction. The team moved swiftly, working in perfect synchrony as they dismantled the Vrotha's command protocols. Aaron hacked into the Vrotha's central systems, while Jace planted a series of high-level explosives designed to disable the command core permanently. The Vroth, still reeling from the communications blackout, struggled to regain control, but they were too late. Command core is down. Jace's voice echoed through Kala's earpiece. I've triggered the secondary failsafes. We've got 10 minutes before the ship becomes unstable. Move out, now. Kala shouted. The team quickly began their retreat, knowing that the clock was ticking. The Vroth car was about to go into lockdown, and if they didn't escape in time, it would be their tomb. The resistance fighters scrambled to the extraction point, their way covered by a hail of gunfire. Aaron, leading the way, was the first to reach the escape pod bay. But as they entered, a massive explosion rocked the ship, knocking several of them to the ground. The explosion had triggered the Vrotha's self-destruct sequence. Everyone, get in the pods, now. Kala's voice was urgent as she sprinted toward the pod bay. The resistance fighters piled into the escape pods, and with one final, desperate push, they launched into space, leaving the crumbling Vroth car behind. The ship erupted in a massive explosion as they escaped, the shockwave shaking their pods. They had done it, the Vrotha's command center was destroyed, their fleet thrown into disarray. And as the remains of the flagship drifted into the void, Kala knew that humanity had just won its most significant victory. But the war was far from over. Their strike had struck a fatal blow to the Vroth, but the invaders would return. And humanity would be ready. The escape pods hurtled through space, their hulls rattling from the shockwave of the Vroth car's catastrophic explosion. Inside, the resistance team was silent, their faces pale from the harrowing escape. Kala Voss sat in the cockpit of her pod, her hands gripping the controls tightly, staring out at the growing distance between them and the shattered remains of the Vroth flagship. The mission had been a success. The command ship was destroyed, and the Vroth were in disarray. But the cost had been steep. The resistance had lost some of its finest soldiers in the chaos, and the Vroth were not easily beaten. This was only one battle in a much larger war, and Kala knew it. She looked down at her hand, still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. There was no time to rest, no time to mourn. They had just won a major victory, but it had come with a heavy price. Status report, she said, her voice a little hoarse. We've made it to the rendezvous point, Jace's voice crackled over the comms. The fleet is waiting for us. But we've lost some good people. We'll need time to regroup and recover. Aaron Kala's voice followed, quieter but filled with the same grim determination. We've done what we set out to do, Kala. The Vroth won't recover from this anytime soon. But they will come for us. They'll retaliate, and we need to be ready. Kala nodded, her thoughts momentarily drifting to the faces of the soldiers they had lost. It wasn't just their lives at stake anymore. It was humanity's future. Everyone get back to the fleet, she ordered, her voice steely. We regroup. We plan the next strike. We don't have the luxury of mourning just yet. The Hope's ember hovered in orbit above a forgotten moon,
one of many hidden outposts where the Resistance had set up makeshift bases in the years following Earth's invasion. The fleet of escape pods and ragtag ships had gathered there, and as the last pod touched down, the command center was quickly filled with officers and soldiers ready to debrief and plan their next moves. Kala stepped off the pod, her boots thudding on the cold metal of the moon's surface. The rest of the team followed close behind, their faces marked by exhaustion, but also with something else, the fire of determination. Inside the command center, the mood was tense, but not without hope. Maps of the Vrotha's remaining strongholds were spread across the hollow table, and reports of the damage inflicted on their fleet were already being analyzed. "Captain," Aaron said, her voice direct as always, "we've crippled their communications, shattered their central command. But the Vroth are adaptable. They won't stop, not now. We know they're already assembling a new fleet. They're going to strike back hard." "I don't need to hear that," Kala said, the weariness in her voice creeping through despite her resolve. "I need to know when we strike next. We need to hit them before they can fully recover," Jace chimed in, his eyes narrowing as he ran calculations on the holodisplay. "But we don't have the resources we need to launch a full-scale assault. We're stretched thin. There's no way we can take on another flagship with the forces we have." Kala paused, then looked at the map. It was clear that a direct assault on the Vroth would lead to more losses, but there was another option, a riskier one. The Hope's Ember and the remaining ships in the fleet weren't enough to topple the Vrotha's juggernaut, but they could destabilize their operations further by targeting their supply chains, cutting off their reinforcements, and hitting key installations. "I've got an idea," Kala said, the spark of a plan forming. "We target their supply hubs. We hit their resource mining operations and fuel depots. We disrupt their ability to wage war." Aaron raised an eyebrow. "It's a bold move, Captain. But you're right. If we cut off their resources, we can cripple their ability to maintain their war machine. The Vroth rely heavily on their supply lines to keep their fleets operational. We take that out, we hit them where it hurts." Kala turned to Jace. "Can you make it happen?" Jace didn't hesitate. "We've got the tech to hack into their supply chain systems. It'll take some finesse, but we can make it work. The Vroth won't see us coming." A chorus of agreement swept through the room. The Resistance was united once again, ready to press the advantage they had earned. But even as they prepared for their next strike, the weight of the war still hung over them. It was a brutal, unrelenting fight, and each victory came at a cost. As the meeting broke up and the planning began in earnest, Kala lingered by the window, staring out at the stars. The Vroth was gone, and their leadership was in chaos. But the Vroth were not finished yet. They would strike again. Earth was their prize, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim it. In the distance, the fleet was preparing for its next mission, the soldiers moving like a well-oiled machine, a reflection of their captain's unyielding resolve. Kala knew that the war was far from over. But this time, Earth wasn't the underdog. The Resistance had proven that they could fight back, and they would continue to do so until the Vroth were driven from their home. "We'll get there," she muttered to herself, her eyes narrowing in determination. "We'll take it back." As the final preparations for the next strike were made, a message came through the fleet's secure communications channel. It was from the last known resistance group on Mars. They had intercepted a Vroth transmission. It was clear, and it was chilling. The Vroth were preparing a full-scale invasion of Earth's remaining colonies. Their revenge would be swift. And this time, they would come for the heart of humanity itself. Kala's fists clenched, her jaw tight. It wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about every human out there, those still standing and those who had fallen. The resistance would rise again. It would rise together. And the Vroth would never see it coming. The next phase of the war was beginning. The fight was about to get even harder. But Kala Voss was ready. The resistance was ready. Humanity's survival depended on the choices they made now. They would strike, not just for survival, but for revenge.
The message from Mars had shattered any illusions of respite. The Vroth were coming, this time with everything they had. The Resistance had won a battle, but the war was about to reach its brutal climax. Kala Voss stood at the center of the command room aboard Hope's Ember, staring at the intercepted transmission. The Vrotha's invasion force was set to descend upon Earth and the scattered human colonies within days. It would be a scorched earth campaign, a final attempt to break humanity for good. But Kala wasn't going to let that happen. Their fleet is still regrouping, Jace reported, his fingers dancing across the hollow console. But they've reinforced their numbers. We're looking at least 100 warships, multiple carriers, and Harbinger-class bombers. He exhaled sharply. It's everything they have left. They're desperate, Aaron muttered, arms crossed. We hurt them worse than they're willing to admit. They're throwing all their forces into this, hoping to end us in one sweep. Kala's mind raced. A full-on fight against the Vroth fleet was suicide, even with their recent victories. They had to outthink them, not outgun them. Then it hit her. We don't fight them head-on, she said, turning to the room. We lead them into a trap. The others exchanged glances. Go on, Jace urged. Kala activated the holomap of Earth and the surrounding systems. The Vroth expect us to fight defensively, to protect what we have left. But instead, we give them what they want, we make them believe they've already won. She tapped the projection of Earth's upper atmosphere. We send a distress signal. We make it look like our forces are crumbling, like we're on our last legs. When they move in to finish us off, we spring the trap. Aaron's eyes widened. You want to lure them in close, right into Earth's gravity well. Kala nodded. Exactly. We'll detonate EMP charges in orbit, disabling their fleet's advanced targeting systems. Meanwhile, we activate our planetary defenses, what's left of them, and hit them with everything we have. And the final blow? She zoomed in on the abandoned orbital platforms above Earth, old weapons from wars long past. Rusted, barely functional. But still dangerous. The Vroth think we're weak. They think Earth is vulnerable, Kala said. But we use these platforms to turn their own arrogance against them. Jace grinned. If we can hack into those orbital cannons and reactivate them, we'll have enough firepower to wipe out half their fleet before they realize what's happening. Aaron's lips curled into a smile. And by the time they do, it'll be too late. It was a desperate plan. Risky. But it was their best shot. Kala turned to the crew, her eyes blazing. We make our stand here. We fight for Earth, for Mars, for every last human still out there. And we make sure the Vroth never threaten us again. No one hesitated. The battle for humanity was about to begin. ### the Battle of Earth. The Vroth fleet arrived in overwhelming numbers, blotting out the stars as they descended upon Earth. Their victory was assured. Humanity had no more fight left in them, at least, that's what they believed. As the first wave of Vroth warships entered low orbit, the trap was sprung. EMP charges detonated across the atmosphere, sending waves of disruption through the enemy fleet. Vroth targeting systems short-circuited, communications collapsed into chaos, and their battle formations crumbled. That's when the Resistance struck. From the ruins of Earth cities, hidden artillery batteries and missile silos unleashed devastation. Resistance warships, hiding in the planet's shadow, emerged and rained fire upon the stunned Vroth fleet. And then, the final piece. Jace and a team of hackers aboard Hope's Ember bypassed the ancient orbital platform security codes. The dormant cannons, silent for decades, powered up. The first shot fired, ripping through the lead Vroth dreadnought. Then another. And another. The orbital platforms turned Earth's sky into a death trap, obliterating the Vroth ships before they could recover. What had once been humanity's last stand was turning into a massacre, against the Vroth. Inside the enemy flagship, the Vroth High Commander, Kvaran, realized the truth too late. His fleet was in shambles, his forces decimated. The mighty Vroth, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, were being hunted. And then, Calavas's voice cut through the broken comms. "This is Earth. And you do not own us." With that, the final wave of resistance fighters stormed the flagship, cutting down the last of the Vroth leadership. By the time the battle was over, the Vroth were no more. Their fleet was destroyed, their empire shattered. The once mighty conquerors of Earth had been brought to their knees. Humanity had won. ###the dawn of a new age. The battle was over, but the scars remained. Earth was a broken world, its cities in ruins, its people few. But the war had not ended in extinction. Calavas stood atop the ruins of an old resistance bunker, looking out at the rising sun. Jace and Aaron joined her, their expressions weary but triumphant. "We did it," Aaron said softly. Cala exhaled. "Yeah. We did." The galaxy was forever changed. The Vroth were gone, but countless other alien races had watched humanity struggle. Some as enemies. Others as potential allies. Earth was no longer a conquered world. It was something far more dangerous. A warning. A promise. Humanity had reclaimed the galaxy. And this time, no one would take it from them again.